They shaved a cleaner's head for fun. Liv streamed it to thousands. Laughed while she cried. What didn't they know? The quiet man watching from the corner wasn't just anybody. He was her husband. A tech billionaire worth £8.3 billion. But here's where this story gets interesting. When he stood up to defend her, she told him to sit back down. This is the story of Grace Bennett, a woman who spent 3 years being invisible, being underestimated, being dismissed. And the night she decided she was done letting anyone fight her battles. Even a billionaire. What happens when humiliation goes viral? When a secret marriage explodes into public view? When you have to choose between revenge and something harder? Grace? Stick around. Because this story goes places you won't expect. Drop a comment right now telling me where you're watching from. And if quiet strength is your thing, hit that subscribe button. Trust me, you'll want to see where this goes. 3 years earlier, life had looked very different for Grace Bennett. The late afternoon sun slanted through Sterling Tower's windows, turning the marble floors into rivers of gold. Grace pushed her cleaning cart past executive offices, humming along to Aretha Franklin through her earbuds, quietly enough that no one would complain, loudly enough to make the work feel less like work. "Evening, Ms. Grace," Mr. Harrison called out from the security desk, looking up from his crossword puzzle. 15 across. Divine favor, unearned. 6 letters. Grace didn't even pause. "That's easy, Mr. Harrison." "Tersey." He chuckled, filling it in. "Should have known. You always make these too easy for me. Maybe you should get harder puzzles," she called back, grinning. Grace Bennett, night cleaner at Sterling Tower. Daughter of a father with early onset Alzheimer's. A Christian woman who wore her grandmother's cross necklace every single day. And, unknown to everyone in this building, wife to Julian Cross, the tech billionaire whose company owned the top 10 floors of this very tower. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Fast forward to the present day. A Friday evening that would change everything. At the main reception desk, Mrs. Chen was reorganizing her collection of porcelain cats for the 3rd time that week. Grace had learned this nervous habit meant trouble was brewing. "They want to cut the evening cleaning staff by half," Mrs. Chen said without looking up from her cats. Said the building's overserviced. As if clean toilets just happen by magic. Grace set down her spray bottle. "They say which positions? Yours is safe. You're the only one who cleans the executive floor without breaking anything expensive." Mrs. Chen finally looked up, her expression softening. "But Sarah Miguel, they're worried." "Then we'll figure something out," Grace said, squeezing the older woman's hand. "We always do." That's when the elevator chimed. Grace's stomach tightened, not with fear exactly, but with that specific exhaustion that comes from dealing with Derek Stone and his crowd. They weren't evil, just thoughtless. The way only people who'd never had to think about consequences could be. Derek emerged with his usual entourage. Brandon, who laughed too loudly at everything. Marcus, who filmed everything. And James, who somehow made agreeing with Derek his entire personality. Well, Derek announced to no one in particular, the help's still here. Burning the midnight oil, Grace? Or just burning through our patience? Brandon snorted. Marcus's phone was already up, catching everything. Grace kept her eyes on the water cooler she was wiping down. "Just doing my job, Mr. Stone." "Your job." Derek moved closer. She could smell the whiskey on him. "You know what I love about your job? You could disappear tomorrow and literally no one would notice. That's the beauty of being, what's the word I'm looking for? Essential." Grace suggested, not looking up. "Replaceable," Derek corrected, delighted with himself. "I was going to say replaceable." Something flickered in Grace's chest. Not hurt exactly, because she'd heard variations of this before. But anger. Small and hot and tired of being swallowed. "Funny," she said, still wiping the same spot on the cooler, her voice steady. "I was thinking the same thing about middle management." The silence that followed was delicious. Brandon's laugh cut off mid-breath. Marcus's phone wavered. Even James looked uncomfortable. Derek's face went red, then white, then red again. What did you just? Nothing, sir. Grace straightened up, meeting his eyes for the first time. Just wondering what makes someone essential. Have a good evening. Pause the video for a second. Have you ever had that moment where you finally stood up to someone? Tell me about it in the comments. Grace pushed her cart toward the supply closet, her heart hammering, her hands shaking, but not with fear. With something else. Something that felt dangerously like power. Behind her, Derek muttered, "Did she just?" "She totally did," Brandon whispered back, and there was something in his voice that might have been respect. In the supply closet, Grace let herself lean against the shelves, breathing hard. Her phone buzzed with a text. "Julian, how's your shift? Missing you." She smiled, typing back, "Fine. Just reminded someone that cleaners aren't invisible. Might have been a mistake. Julian, or the best decision you made all day. Proud of you. Grace, easy for you to say from Tokyo. You don't have to see his face tomorrow. Julian, I'll be back sooner than you think." The emergency board meeting got moved up. And Grace. Grace, yeah. Julian, you were never invisible. Not to me. Grace pulled out the letter she'd been writing to him, an actual paper letter, because Julian kept them all in a box labeled Grace's Theology of Everyday Things. She added a new paragraph. "Today I learned something about myself. I learned that I'm tired of being quiet. Maybe silence isn't always strength. Maybe sometimes strength is saying the thing that makes people uncomfortable. You'd probably say I'm overthinking it. But Jules, what if I'm not?" She tucked it away and headed back to finish her shift, not knowing that her moment of defiance had set something in motion. That Derek Stone wasn't the type to let an insult slide. That tomorrow would bring something worse than words. And that was when it did, she'd have to choose. Let someone else fight for her, or find her own voice in the chaos. What Grace didn't know. Derek had been filming that whole exchange. And he had plans to get even. 24 hours later. Friday evening. The worst shift of the week. Grace was on her knees in the executive lounge, scrubbing coffee stains out of the carpet. Someone had knocked over an entire French press and just left it. That's when she heard the elevator. Loud voices. Drunk voices. Her hands stilled on the brush. "Telling you she thinks she's better than us." Derek's voice carried across the floor, slurring slightly. "Called me replaceable. Me." Maybe she was joking? That was James, always trying to smooth things over. Maybe she needs to remember her place. Grace stood slowly, grabbing her cleaning cart. She'd learned over the years that the best strategy when dealing with drunk executives was to be boring. Finish quickly, leave quietly, let them forget you were ever there. But as she tried to wheel the cart toward the service elevator, Derek stepped into her path. His phone was up. Recording. The live stream counter was climbing. 847. 1,203. 2,556. There she is. Sterling Tower's finest. "Tell me, Grace." He drew out her name mockingly. "Still feeling mouthy today?" Marcus and Brandon flanked him, their phones out too. James hung back, looking uncomfortable but not uncomfortable enough to leave. "Just trying to finish my shift, Mr. Stone. If you'll excuse me." "See, that's what I don't get," Derek continued, moving closer. "You work here. We pay to work here. Why don't you act like you're grateful?" "I am grateful," Grace said quietly. "I'm grateful for honest work. For being able to care for my father. For what? For your little God." Derek's hand shot out and flicked the cross necklace at her throat. "Does Jesus pay your bills, Grace? Or do we?" Something shifted in the air. Even Brandon looked uncomfortable now. "That's not," James started, but Derek cut him off. "You know what this stream needs? A makeover segment. Grace here with her cultural statement needs some editorial input." Grace's stomach dropped. "Derek, you're drunk. Just go home." "I'm creative," he corrected. His hand moved to her cleaning cart. Grabbed the scissors she kept for opening supply boxes. Everything happened too fast and too slow at once. The tug at her scalp. The snick of blades. The horrible feeling of violation. The shocked sound from her own throat. A section of her braids, hours of work, hours of care, fell to the polished floor. For a moment, the only sound was blood rushing in Grace's ears. Then a voice cut through. "What the hell is wrong with you?" Not Grace's voice. James's. He stepped forward, his face pale with shock and anger. "Derek, what? Why would you? It's just hair, man. Chill." Derek was laughing, but it sounded forced now. Uncertain. "It's just a joke." "That's not a joke." James's voice cracked. That's assault. He looked at Grace, seemed to really see her for the first time. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." Grace couldn't speak. Couldn't move. Her hand went to the back of her head, feeling the jagged, uneven place where her braid had been. Marcus's phone was shaking. "Dude, I think we should." "We should what?" Derek's bravado was cracking now, fear seeping in. "It's fine. Grace, come on. You know I didn't mean." But Grace was already backing away. Her cleaning cart was abandoned. Her vision blurred with tears she refused to let fall. Not here. Not in front of them. She ran. Take a breath right now. Pause if you need to. Have you ever been in a moment where everything changed in an instant? Drop a comment. Sometimes we need to know we're not alone in these experiences. 11 minutes after the assault. In the supply closet, Grace sank to the floor, her back against the shelves. Her phone was buzzing, messages flooding in from people she didn't want to know. The video was already viral. Through the door, she could hear voices. Calling security, police need to, can't believe he actually. And then, cutting through everything, a voice that made her heart stop. "That's my wife." Grace's head snapped up. That voice. He wasn't supposed to be back until Tuesday. He wasn't supposed to be here. The supply closet door opened. Julian Cross stood there, still in maintenance coveralls, a baseball cap in his hand, electrical testing equipment clipped to his belt. He'd been in the building, working undercover, something he did sometimes when he wanted to really understand what was happening in his own company. He'd seen everything. "Jules," Grace started, her voice breaking. He was across the small space in 2 steps, pulling her into his arms, careful not to touch her head, just holding her while she finally let herself cry. "I know," he whispered into her hair. "I know. I've got you." Outside, someone was shouting. "Security. Mrs. Chen." The building had erupted. But in the supply closet, there was just them. After a while, Julian pulled back slightly. His voice was tight with barely controlled rage. "I'm going out there. I'm going to." "No." He looked at her in surprise. "Grace." "No," she said again, firmer this time. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, squared her shoulders. "This is mine. My hurt. My response. Mine. But I can." "I know you can," Grace interrupted, her voice steadier now. "I know exactly what you can do. You can buy buildings, move markets, and destroy careers with a phone call. But Jules," she cupped his face in her hands, "this isn't your fight to win for me." He stared at her. She could see the war happening behind his eyes. The instinct to protect versus the respect for her autonomy. The love that wanted to shield her versus the love that knew she was strong enough to shield herself. "Then what do you need?" he asked finally. "I need you to trust me," Grace said. "I need you to let me handle this my way first. And if I can't," she managed a small smile, "then you can go full billionaire on them." Julian's laugh was wet and surprised. "Full billionaire? You know what I mean." He kissed her forehead gently. "I do. And I will. But Grace, the video's out there. It's everywhere. By morning, this whole thing will be." "I know," Grace said quietly. That's why I need to move fast. Before anyone else writes my story for me. She stood, straightened her uniform, and touched the ruined braid one more time. Then she pulled out her phone and opened the camera. What are you doing? Julian asked. Taking back my narrative, Grace said, hitting record. What happened next would change everything. Not because a billionaire swooped in to save her, but because Grace Bennett decided to save herself. In 15 minutes, Grace's video would have 2 million views. In 24 hours? 14 million. And the world would never see her, or Julian, the same way again. Grace sat on the floor of the supply closet, phone propped against a bottle of cleaning solution. The fluorescent lights were harsh and unflattering. No makeup to hide her tear-streaked face. No filter to soften the reality. Just truth. My name is Grace Bennett Cross. Julian stood just off camera, silent but present. She could feel his support like a physical thing. 15 minutes ago, someone cut my hair without my permission while filming it for entertainment. You've probably already seen the video. It's everywhere by now, that's how the internet works. Her voice wavered but didn't break. I'm a cleaner. I work night shifts at Sterling Tower. I'm also a daughter. My father has early onset Alzheimer's, and I'm his primary caregiver. I'm a Christian, you can probably tell by the cross I'm wearing, the one that got mocked right before the scissors came out. She paused, collecting her thoughts. I'm also a wife. My husband's... That part's complicated. But here's what's not complicated. What happened tonight wasn't a joke. It wasn't a prank. It was an assault. It was humiliation weaponized for clicks and views. And I'm not going to let it be the end of my story. She leaned forward, her eyes intense. I've spent 3 years working in this building. 3 years of being invisible to most people. And you know what? That was fine. I found dignity in the work. I found purpose in service. But tonight showed me something. Her jaw tightened. Being invisible isn't the same as being powerless. And staying quiet isn't the same as having nothing to say. She glanced off camera at Julian, drew strength from his nod. So here's what happens next. I'm filing a police report. I'm pressing charges. And I'm going to keep showing up, to work, to life, to every space I have a right to occupy. Her voice softened as she touched her ruined braid. The man who did this will face consequences. But this video isn't about revenge. It's about something else. It's about the thousands of people, mostly women, mostly black and brown, mostly in service jobs, who've been treated like furniture. Like jokes. Like we're not fully human. This is for you. You're not invisible. Your dignity matters. Your voice matters. She reached forward, her hand hovering over the stop button. Tomorrow, the man who assaulted me will probably learn who my husband is. There will be headlines. Speculation. Drama. But before all that noise starts, I wanted to say this in my own words. Grace looked directly into the camera. My worth doesn't come from my husband's bank account. It comes from the same place yours does, from being a human being deserving of respect. Period. She stopped recording. For a long moment, the supply closet was silent. Then Julian spoke. That was perfect. It was true, Grace corrected, staring at the phone. Now let's see if the truth is enough. She uploaded the video to every platform she had. Posted it with one hashtag, #NotInvisible. Then she turned off her phone. Now what? Julian asked. Now, Grace stood, brushing off her uniform, I finish my shift. Grace. I finish my shift, she repeated more firmly. Mrs. Chen's already short-staffed. People depend on this building being clean. I'm not letting Derek Stone take that from me too. Julian stared at her like he was seeing someone new. Or maybe like he was seeing who she'd been all along, just clearer now. Okay, he said finally. Then I finish mine too. They emerged from the supply closet together. Mrs. Chen stood by the elevators, arms crossed, face set like stone. Derek Stone and his friends are gone, she reported. Security escorted them out. Police are on their way. Thank you, Grace said. Don't thank me yet. Mrs. Chen's expression softened slightly. Building management wants to see you on Monday. They're concerned about the publicity. Concerned I'll sue them? Among other things. Grace nodded slowly. I'll be here. Mrs. Chen stepped forward, taking both her hands. And Grace? What you did, speaking up like that on your own terms, that took more courage than anything else you could have done. Or it was really stupid, Grace said with a weak laugh. Courage usually looks stupid until it works, Mrs. Chen replied. By the time Grace and Julian left the building 3 hours later, after police statements, after incident reports, after Grace insisted on actually finishing the executive floor cleaning because someone has to, and I'm already here, her video had been viewed 2.3 million times. The comments were complicated. This woman is brave. Speaking her truth before anyone else could spin it. Wait, so she's married? To whom? Anyone else notice she didn't say who her husband is? That's interesting. Grace read them in the car on the way home, Julian driving, both of them exhausted. They're wondering about you, she said quietly. Let them wonder, Julian replied. This is your story. You decide when to tell the rest. Grace put her phone down, watching London slide past the window. The city looked the same as always. But she felt different. Not broken. Not small. Just different. Jules. Yeah. Thank you for letting me do this my way. His hand found hers across the console. Thank you for teaching me that love sometimes means stepping back. They drove the rest of the way home in comfortable silence, both knowing that tomorrow would bring new challenges. The reveal of who Julian was would come eventually. The media storm would hit. Their private life would become public property. But tonight, Grace had claimed her voice. And that, she thought, was worth everything that came next. Grace spoke. 14 million people listened. But there was one viewer whose reaction would surprise everyone, including himself. Saturday morning, 8 hours after the assault. Derek Stone woke up on his sofa, still in his clothes from the night before, his phone dead on the floor beside him. His head pounded. His mouth tasted like regret and whiskey. And his hands wouldn't stop shaking. He plugged in his phone. Waited for it to come to life. Already knew it would be bad. It was worse than bad. 873 missed calls. Thousands of messages. His face on every news site. And Grace's video, the one she'd filmed right after, sitting on a supply closet floor, had been viewed 14 million times. Her words echoed in his mind. What happened tonight wasn't a joke. It wasn't a prank. It was an assault. Derek's stomach turned. He ran to the bathroom and threw up. When he came back, his phone was ringing. His father. Do you have any idea? Gerald Stone's voice was ice cold. What you've done? Dad, I was drunk, I didn't. You didn't think. You never think. Do you know that building? Sterling Tower? Do you know who owns it? Derek's mouth went dry. The Crosstech subsidiaries lease most of. Julian Cross owns the building, Derek owns it. And you assaulted his wife on camera. The world tilted. His what? His wife. The cleaner you decided to humiliate is married to one of the most powerful men in Europe. Gerald's voice cracked slightly, the first real emotion Derek had heard from him in years. Now every deal our company has, every contract, every property lease, all of it is at risk. Christ, Derek. What did I raise you to be? The line went dead. Derek sat in his expensive flat, surrounded by expensive things he'd bought to fill expensive emptiness. And for the first time in 15 years, he let himself cry. Not because of the consequences, though those were coming, he could feel them gathering like storm clouds. But because somewhere in the wreckage of last night, he'd finally seen himself clearly. And the view was ugly. A flash of memory hit him. His mother. He was 7 years old, watching her brush her hair. Before the cancer. Before it all fell out. Before she died, And his father remarried so fast it was like she'd never existed. "You have kind eyes, Derek," she'd said. "Don't lose that." He had. Somewhere along the way, he'd drowned kindness in whiskey and cruelty. Derek opened his laptop, watched Grace's video again, and again, and again. Being invisible isn't the same as being powerless. His hands shook as he set up his phone camera. No script. No PR team. Just him and his mess. "My name is Derek Stone." His voice was rough, broken from crying and throwing up. 3 nights ago, I assaulted Grace Bennett, Grace Cross, while filming it for entertainment. I cut her hair without permission. I mocked her faith. I treated her like she was less than human. He paused, visibly struggling. "I was drunk. That's not an excuse, it's just a fact. I was drunk. I'm always drunk, because I've been running from pain since I was 15, and somewhere along the way I decided the best way to not feel small was to make other people smaller." His voice cracked. Grace made a video, talking about being invisible, about service workers being treated like furniture. And she was right. I saw her every day for 3 years and never once actually saw her. He looked directly at the camera, tears on his face. "I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I'm sorry. Grace, I'm so sorry. And to everyone else I've hurt with my so-called jokes over the years, I'm sorry to you too." He stopped recording. Derek stared at the video for 10 minutes. Then he posted it. No filters. No edits. Just truth. And then he called his father back. "Dad? I need help. Real help. Not a lawyer. Not a PR team. His voice broke. "I need to get sober. And I need to figure out who I am without the alcohol and the anger." "Derek," his father interrupted, and his voice was softer now. Uncertain. "Son, I should have done this years ago. After your mother. I know," Derek said quietly. "But we can start now. If you want." "I want," Gerald said, and Derek heard something he hadn't heard in 15 years, his father crying. Derek's apology went viral. 8 million views in 6 hours. And suddenly, the villain had become complicated, which made Grace's next decision a lot harder than anyone expected. Okay, let's stop here for a second. I know some of you are thinking, he doesn't deserve sympathy. He assaulted her. And you're right. He did. But here's what this story is really about. What do you do when the person who hurt you turns out to be human? Brokenness. Guilty, absolutely. But human. Drop a comment right now. If you think Grace should accept Derek's apology, type Grace. If you think he's just trying to save himself, type justice. If you're not sure, if you're wrestling with this like I am, type complicated. And while you're down there, hit that like button. This story is about to get even more intense. Let's keep moving. Monday morning, 3 days after the assault. Grace stood in Sterling Tower's lobby at 6 in the morning, staring at the bronze sculpture she'd walked past 1,000 times. Reaching higher, it was called, hands stretched toward the sky. Today it looked like a prayer. Or a question. Thought I'd find you here. Julian, looking exhausted. He'd been at emergency board meetings since Sunday evening. You should be home, Grace said. Sleeping. Should be. Not going to be. He moved to stand beside her. Richard wants to hold a press conference. Today. Full reveal, who I am, who you are, and our marriage. Get ahead of the story. What did you tell him? I told him to wait. That it's your decision. Grace closed her eyes. Jules, your company is bleeding. I saw the stock numbers. I don't care about the stock. Liar, she said, but gently. You care about the jobs. The employees. The people who depend on Crosstech. He didn't deny it. The Singapore deal fell through, Julian admitted quietly. Frankfurt is reconsidering. Boston merger is on pause. Richard thinks we'll lose 20 to 30% of our market value by the end of the week. Grace felt like she'd been punched. Because of me. Because of Derek Stone. Because of my board's cowardice. Because I'm the problem they need solved, Grace finished. You're not a problem. Then what am I? Julian turned to face her fully. You're my wife. You're the woman I love. And you're someone who deserves to control her own story, even when that story is costing me billions. Before Grace could respond, the lobby doors burst open. Mrs. Chin, moving faster than Grace had ever seen her, face flushed. Grace. Thank God. You need to see this. She pulled out her phone, hands shaking. It was a video. Derek. Sitting in what looked like his living room, looking like he hadn't slept in days. My name is Derek Stone. 3 nights ago, I assaulted Grace Bennett, Grace Cross, while filming it for entertainment. I was drunk because I'm always drunk, because I've been running from pain since I was 15. I saw her every day for 3 years and never once actually saw her. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I'm sorry. The video ended. The lobby was silent. He posted that? Grace asked quietly. Voluntarily? 2 hours ago, Mrs. Chin confirmed. It's everywhere. 8 million views. People are actually listening. Julian's phone buzzed. Then again. Then continuously. He looked at the screen shocked. Richard says the board, Singapore, is reconsidering. They said Derek's apology showed moral accountability. That the situation might be salvageable if we handle it right. Grace felt dizzy. Handle it right, meaning what? Meaning, Julian said slowly, they want to know if you're pressing charges. If you're suing, what you want to happen next. What I want. Grace laughed high and slightly hysterical. I want to not have been assaulted. I want to rewind 4 days. She stopped. Took a breath. I want, Grace said slowly, finding the words as she spoke them, to talk to him. Face to face. Before I decide anything else. Julian blinked. You want to what? Talk to Derek. Hear him. Actually hear him, not a video, not a press release. I need to know if that apology was real. Grace, you don't owe him. I know, she interrupted. I don't owe him anything. But I owe myself the truth. And I can't know what's true from a video. Mrs. Chin stepped forward. You're sure about this, honey? No, Grace admitted. But I'm doing it anyway. 2 days later, Grace and Derek would meet face to face. No cameras. No lawyers in the room. Just 2 people trying to find the truth in the wreckage. What happened next would shock everyone, including them. Wednesday afternoon. They met in a conference room at a neutral location, a law office in Holborn. Lawyers present but silent in the corners. Julian was waiting outside, close enough to reach Grace in seconds if she needed him. Derek arrived 10 minutes early. Grace watched him through the glass door, saw how his hands shook as he poured water, how he sat, stood, sat again, unable to settle. When she entered, he shot to his feet like she'd struck him. Grace, Mrs. Cross, Sit, Grace said quietly. Please. They sat on opposite sides of the table. An ocean of polished wood between them. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Derek said, I don't know how to start. Start with why, Grace replied. Your video said a lot of things. But it didn't say why me. Why that night? Why do you think any of that was okay? Derek's jaw worked. You want the truth? I want the truth. Because you weren't afraid of me, Derek said finally. Grace waited. That day, Thursday before Friday, when you told me I was replaceable, you looked at me like I was nothing special. And I couldn't handle it. He continued, words coming faster now. My whole life, people have been afraid of me. Afraid of my father's money, my family's name, what I could do to their careers. But you just cleaned around me like I was furniture. And when I pushed, you pushed back. Like I was just another asshole. You were, Grace said simply. I know. But everyone else pretended I wasn't. They laughed at my jokes. They made me feel like maybe I was special, not just, he stopped, swallowed hard, not just the kid whose mom died and whose dad remarried so fast it was like she never existed. Grace felt something shift in her chest. Not forgiveness, not yet, maybe not ever. But understanding. Your mother died, she said. You were young. 7. Derek looked at his hands. And everyone told me to be strong. To not cry. To be a man. So I stopped feeling anything. Started drinking to not feel. And then I became this. Silence. Then Grace asked the question that mattered. Are you sorry because you got caught? Or sorry because you hurt me? Derek looked up, tears on his face. Real ones. I'm sorry because when I cut your hair, I saw my mother, he whispered. For just a second. The way she looked when the chemo took hers. How she cried in the bathroom because she thought I couldn't hear. And I did it anyway. I hurt you anyway. And I don't know how to live with that. Grace felt her own tears coming and didn't fight them. Your mother's pain doesn't excuse what you did, she said firmly. Your trauma doesn't erase mine. I know. But, Grace continued, and the word hung between them like a bridge, pain doesn't make you evil. It makes you human. Broken, but human. Derek wiped his face roughly. What happens now? Grace had been asking herself the same question for 4 days. Now, she said slowly, you do the work. Real work, not just apology videos. Therapy. Rehab for the drinking. Community service. I want you to actually see the people you've been stepping on. Okay. Derek nodded quickly. Oh yes. Whatever. I'm not done, Grace interrupted. You also face legal consequences. I'm pressing charges. Not for money, I don't want your money. But because actions have consequences, and you need to learn that. Derek's face paled, but he nodded. I understand. And Derek. Grace leaned forward. If you waste this, if you treat it like a PR problem to solve instead of a life to rebuild, I will come back. And I will destroy you. Not because of revenge. But because people like you only learn when the consequences are real. I won't waste it, Derek said, and something in his voice sounded like hope. I promise. Grace stood. The meeting was over. But at the door she paused. Your mother, she said, not looking back. What was her name? Catherine, Derek replied, surprised. Why? Because she deserves to be remembered as more than your excuse, Grace said. Go talk to someone about her. Actually grieve. Stop running. She left, walking into the waiting area where Julian immediately stood. How did it? Grace walked into his arms, let him hold her. I did it, she whispered into his chest. I looked at him and I didn't hate him. That's because you're better than all of us, Julian murmured. No, Grace pulled back, meeting his eyes. I'm just tired of hate. It's heavy. And I want to be light. Through the conference room window, Derek Stone sat with his head in his hands, crying for the first time since he was 7 years old. And maybe, just maybe, beginning to heal. Grace chose mercy. But mercy doesn't mean escape. Derek would face consequences. The press would demand answers. And Grace would have to stand before the world one more time, this time with Julian by her side. 1 week later, the press conference was held at Cross Tech headquarters. Every major outlet was there. Cameras and microphones created a forest of attention that made Grace's hands shake. But she walked to the podium anyway, Julian beside her, their hands clasped. Good morning. Thank you for coming. Julian's voice was clear and strong. My name is Julian Cross, and this is my wife, Grace Bennett Cross. We've been married for 3 years. We kept our marriage private for personal reasons, primarily to protect Grace from scrutiny. Cameras flashed like lightning. Recently, those protections failed, Julian continued, his voice hardening. My wife was assaulted while working in one of my buildings. The incident was filmed and went viral. Grace stepped forward, her voice clear. Some of you have called me brave. Some have called me a gold digger. Some think I planned this for attention. She looked directly at the cameras. Here's what I actually am. I'm a daughter. I'm a Christian. I'm a worker who takes pride in honest labor. And yes, I'm a wife who loves her husband. Her voice grew stronger. What happened to me wasn't unique. It happens every day to service workers, to women, to people of color, to anyone society decides doesn't matter. The only reason you care about my story is because it turned out I'm connected to someone powerful. She let that sink in. But I was worth defending before you knew who I married. And every person working every job deserves the same protection, the same dignity, the same voice. A reporter called out, "Mrs. Cross, are you pressing charges?" "Yes," Grace said firmly. "Not out of vengeance, but because accountability matters. Derek has apologized, and I believe he's sincere. But sincerity doesn't erase consequences." "What about the civil suit? Sources say you could get millions." "I'm not suing for damages," Grace interrupted. "Instead, I'm asking the court to mandate two things. Derek completes comprehensive rehabilitation, including therapy and addiction treatment, and substantial community service at organizations supporting service workers and assault survivors." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. "So you're letting him off easy?" A voice from the back. Grace's expression hardened. "I'm letting him become better. There's nothing easy about that." Julian stepped forward. "I'd like to address questions about Crosstech's response. Yes, we've lost contracts. Yes, our stock has dropped. But I'm not here to apologize for standing by my wife." "Will you step down as CEO?" someone shouted. Julian's pause made Grace's heart stop. "That's a conversation I'm having with my board," he said carefully. "But let me be clear. I will not lead a company that profits from the marginalization of workers. If Crosstech can't be a place where everyone, from executives to cleaners, is treated with dignity, then it doesn't deserve to exist." The room erupted. "Would you sacrifice your career for your principles?" "Hit like if you would. Comment if you're not sure." That evening back home, exhausted, Grace asked, "Did you mean that? About stepping down?" Julian poured wine, his movements careful and tired. "Richard called it an ultimatum. Said I was destroying shareholder value over personal feelings." "Your wife being assaulted is personal feelings?" Grace's voice rose. "To them, yes." Julian sank onto the sofa. "They want me to distance myself. Issue a statement about poor judgment. Basically throw you under the bus to save the company. And I told them to get fucked," Julian said simply. Grace laughed despite everything. "You did not." "I used more professional language. But that was the gist." He took her hand. "Grace, I built Crosstech from nothing. 20 years. But I poured 3 years into us and you're real. The company's just a thing. You're the best thing I ever built. And I'm not sacrificing that for anything." Grace kissed him. Deep and desperate and grateful. When they pulled apart, Julian's phone was buzzing. Richard's name. "Answer it," Grace said. "We need to know." Julian put it on speaker. "Julian," Richard's voice was tight. The board met. "They're calling for a vote of no confidence." Grace felt like she'd been hit. "When?" Julian asked, dangerously calm. "Next week." Julian hung up. For a long moment, they sat in weighted silence. Then Grace said quietly, "Let them vote." Julian looked at her sharply. "Grace." "Let them vote," she repeated more firmly. "Let them show exactly who they are. And then we'll show them who we are." "What do you mean?" Grace stood, pacing, mind working. "You built Cross. You own 43% of the shares. I looked it up. You have allies on the board. And you have something else." "What?" "A story that matters," Grace said. "Not a PR story. A real one. About what kind of company we want to build. About treating people like people. About putting our money where our faith is." She stopped, turned to face him. "Are you in?" Julian stared at her, and slowly, A smile spread across his face. I'm always in. As long as it's with you. Outside, evening settled over London. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The board vote, the media circus, the uncertainty. But tonight, Grace and Julian stood together and planned a revolution. Not with violence or vengeance, but with grace, dignity, and the radical idea that everyone, from the executive suite to the cleaning closet, deserved to be treated like they mattered. Because they did. The battle lines were drawn. The vote was coming. But Grace and Julian had a secret weapon, the truth. And sometimes, the truth is enough to change everything. Autumn had painted London in shades of amber and gold. Grace stood in front of her bathroom mirror one morning, running her fingers through her hair. It had grown back completely. Fuller. Healthier. She smiled at her reflection, remembering Mrs. Chen's words, God makes everything beautiful in its season. Sterling Tower had undergone its own transformation. In the main lobby, where Grace used to push her cleaning cart, stood a new bronze sculpture, Grace Under Pressure. Hands reaching up toward light. A plaque beside it read, In honor of all who serve with dignity. But the sculpture was just the beginning. The Grace Cross Foundation's first community center stood in Brixton, its walls painted with vibrant murals depicting people of all backgrounds rising together. On opening day, the building was filled with supporters, community leaders, donors, families. Children darted through corridors, their laughter echoing off fresh paint. Little Amara, 6 years old with box braids, ran up to Grace. Miss Grace, look what I made. A glitter-covered card. Thank you for showing us how to be brave. Grace hugged her close, heart full. Near the podium, Julian adjusted his tie. When their eyes met, his smile carried all the love that had sustained them. He'd stepped down as CEO of Crosstech 3 months ago, not in defeat, but by choice. Now he devoted his time to the foundation, to Grace, to building something that mattered. Good morning, Julian's voice rang clear. We're here today not just to open a building, but to celebrate a miracle. He paused, finding Grace in the crowd. Many of you know our story, how cruelty tried to break the strongest woman I've ever known. But you may not know what happened after. You may not know how my wife turned her pain into purpose. Every day, I watched her answer hatred with love, respond to mockery with grace. When others demanded vengeance, she chose healing. He let the word settle. Her scars built sanctuaries. Near the back of the room, almost hidden, stood Derek Stone. 6 months of sobriety. 6 months of therapy. 6 months of community service. The change in him was profound. No more swagger, no more cruelty. Just a young man learning to be human again. As Julian finished speaking, Grace's gaze met Derek's across the room. Understanding. Forgiveness. She nodded slightly. Derek nodded back, tears on his face. Not tears of self-pity. Tears of gratitude. After the ceremony, as guests departed, Grace stood with Julian by the window. I got the acceptance letter, she said quietly. Acceptance? Julian looked confused. University. Social work program. Part-time. She smiled. Mrs. Chen helped with the application. I want to do this properly, help people with real training, real credentials. Julian's face broke into the widest smile. Grace Bennett Cross, you never stop amazing me. Grace Bennett Cross, she repeated, grinning. Keeping both names. Bennett to remember where I came from. Cross to celebrate where I'm going. He kissed her, soft and sweet. That evening, they returned to their special place by the Thames. The water rippled with golden light from the setting sun. Dance with me? Julian asked. No music except the city winding down. Distant traffic, rustling leaves, the river flowing. They swayed together, perfectly in sync. Did you ever imagine? Grace whispered. That horrible night would lead to all this? Julian's arms tightened. God's plans are always bigger than our pain. Though I have to admit, watching you turn tragedy into triumph has been the greatest privilege of my life. It's not over, Grace said quietly. The work, the healing, Derek's transformation, my education, the foundation, all of it, it's ongoing. That's what makes it real, Julian replied. Real change doesn't happen in one moment. It happens in 1,000 small moments. Every day choosing grace over bitterness. They continued dancing as stars appeared above them. The cleaner who'd been humiliated had become the voice for the voiceless. The billionaire who'd hidden had become the advocate for the hidden. Together, they turned shame into strength. 1 year later, the late afternoon sun slanted through Sterling Tower's windows. Grace moved through the lobby, not with a cleaning cart this time. She carried a leather messenger bag. University books inside. Social work placement badge clipped to her jacket. She stopped by Mrs. Chen's office, now decorated with photos from the foundation's first year. Hundreds of faces. Hundreds of stories. Hundreds of reasons to keep going. How was class? Mrs. Chen asked. Challenging, Grace admitted. But good. Really good. Through the window, she could see the bronze sculpture in the lobby. Grace under pressure. Afternoon light made it seem to glow. A young woman stood before it, reading the plaque, hand touching the metal gently. Grace recognized that stance, the slight bow of the head, the way the shoulders curved inward. The posture of someone carrying shame they didn't deserve. Without thinking, Grace walked over. Beautiful, isn't it? She said softly. The young woman startled, then nodded. I heard the story. About what happened here. About you. What's your name? Aisha, the woman replied quietly. I work in the coffee shop on the corner. Someone filmed me and posted it online. Made fun of my accent, my English. Now it's everywhere. Grace's heart ached with recognition. Would you like to get a coffee? Grace asked. There's something I'd like to tell you about grace and how it can rebuild anything, even things you think are broken forever. Aisha's eyes filled with tears. Really? Really? Grace said, taking her hand. You're not alone anymore. As they walked out together into the golden afternoon, Grace caught sight of her reflection in the tower's glass doors. She saw a woman transformed, not by suffering, but by choosing grace in the midst of it. The cleaner had become the counselor. The victim had become the victor. The broken had become the builder. And every day, in small moments like these, love continued its quiet work, rebuilding what hatred had tried to destroy. Cut to Derek volunteering at the foundation, genuinely helping, genuinely changed. Cut to Julian meeting with new companies interested in ethical business practices. Cut to Mrs. Chin training the new evening supervisor, a young woman of color Grace had recommended. Cut to the foundation's second location opening in Manchester. Cut to Grace's father, in a rare lucid moment, telling her, your mother would be proud. The story didn't end with one victory. It continued in 1,000 small choices. In grace offered when revenge would be easier. Standing up when staying silent would be safer. In believing that people can change, even when they've hurt you. That evening, Grace and Julian sat on their sofa, her university textbooks spread around them, his laptop open to foundation grant applications. Ordinary. Domestic. You know what I realized? Grace said, looking up from her social work ethics chapter. What's that? That night, when Derek cut my hair, I thought it was the worst thing that could happen to me. I thought it would break me. She touched her hair, now fully grown, styled confidently, natural. But it didn't break me. It just broke open the walls I'd built around myself. The ones that said I had to be small, invisible, quiet. Julian closed his laptop, giving her his full attention. You were never meant to be small. I know that now, Grace replied. But I had to learn it. Through fire. Through pain. Through scissors. Your scars really did build sanctuaries, Julian said softly. Not just mine, Grace corrected. Derek's too. Yours. Mrs. Chen's. Everyone who's been hurt and chose to heal instead of harden. That's what grace does. It doesn't erase the scars. It just makes them mean something. Outside, London hummed with evening life. Inside, two people who'd been tested by fire sat in comfortable silence. Not perfect. Not without struggles. But together. And free. Grace picked up her phone, opened her notes app, and typed. Dear Jules, today I helped someone who reminded me of myself a year ago. Humiliated. Convinced the world would never let her forget her worst moment. I told her what you told me. The world doesn't define us. Our worst moments don't define us. Only love does. And love, it turns out, is the only thing strong enough to rebuild what hate destroys. Forever yours, Grace. She showed it to Julian. He kissed her forehead. Still writing me letters? Always, Grace replied. Some things are too important to say any other way. So that's the story of Grace Bennett Cross. A woman who was assaulted, humiliated, and filmed for the world to mock. A woman who could have chosen revenge, could have destroyed her attacker, could have let bitterness win. But instead, she chose something harder. She chose grace. And here's what I want to know. If you were Grace, what would you have done? Drop it in the comments. I really want to know. Would you have pressed charges without mercy? Would you have taken the money and run? Or would you have done what she did, offered redemption to someone who didn't deserve it? If this story moved you, hit that subscribe button. Tomorrow I've got another story about ordinary people doing extraordinary things. And if you know someone who needs to hear this, someone who's carrying shame that isn't theirs, someone who's been made to feel invisible, share this with them. Sometimes the story someone needs to hear is the one that reminds them. Your scars can build sanctuaries too. This story is dedicated to every person who's ever cleaned a building, served a table, worked a register, or done any job that society calls unskilled. You were never invisible. You were always essential. And your dignity was always worth defending. Thanks for being here. I'll see you tomorrow with another story crafted with heart. Until then, choose grace.